Welcome to our study tonight. I'm glad you can join us. So as always, I'm going to start with in the news and what's been happening this week. Of course, there's a lot that's there. Unfortunately, we just get a cycle from our American news. So obviously I go away from America to get most of our news worldwide because we're not getting it. So this one came out today. 5 reasons why you should be prepping like crazy right now, prepping. So a lot of people seem to think that the summer of 2024 is a time to party. But the truth is that this is a time when they should be feverishly preparing for the extremely chaotic times that are ahead of us. I just don't know what it's going to take for people to wake up and realize how late it is, because we don't realize it. Donald Trump got shot, and that shook people up for a couple of days, but that didn't last very long, did it? Then there was the soft coup in the Democratic Party, and that got people fired up for a little bit, but that also quickly faded. We are living in truly historic times, but the vast majority of the population appears to be clueless. 5 reasons why you should be prepping like crazy right now. Number 1, results of the election in November will unleash a flood of negative emotion. Whatever side loses is going to have a massive temper tantrum. And there is very high risk, and people are calling for it, that we could see widespread violence. In fact, one recent survey actually discovered that 47% of Americans believe that it is likely that there will be a civil war within the next 5 years. 2, armed conflicts are raging all over the globe. The war in Ukraine continues to intensify. China has been threatening Taiwan for a long time now. And the war in the Middle East could potentially escalate on an apocalyptic level by the end of this calendar year, especially what's happened in the past week. Meanwhile, riots, revolutions, and civil unrest are erupting everywhere you look. You don't get it in the news, but trust me, Sudan is a mess. Also, Venezuela, it's right on the verge of erupting in flames. 3, the world is facing a long-term food crisis that isn't going away very soon. Global supplies of food are getting tighter and tighter, and the UN is reporting that hundreds of millions of people did not have enough food to eat last year. Around 733 million people faced hunger in 2023, equivalent to 1 in 11 people globally and 1 in 5 in Africa. 4, many health experts are warning that it is just a matter of time before the next great global pandemic hits us. They're talking about bird flu getting out of hand, Mpox already out of hand in Africa, and etc. 5, historic natural disasters will continue to be a major theme during the second half of this year and beyond. Even here in the United States, there's been quite a bit of highly unusual shaking lately. If you can believe it, one county in Texas has actually declared a state of emergency because it has been hit by more than 100 significant earthquakes within the past week. Scurry County. The judge, Dan Hicks, wrote in his Friday declaration of disaster that since the first earthquake, registered at a magnitude of 5.0, was felt the night of July 22nd, damage has been found throughout Scurry County in businesses and residents. So the perfect storm is now upon us. During the months and years that are ahead, things are going to get so much worse. I wish I didn't have to tell you that, but the writer says, I highly recommend stockpiling food and supplies because it won't be too long before our world goes absolutely nuts. Stocking up doesn't have to be complicated, he says. At this point, so many people are buying emergency food that even Costco is stocking it on their shelves. Costco has an emergency dinner kit. They call it the Apocalypse Bucket online that lasts 25 years. The Redwise Emergency Food Bucket, which boasts 150 freeze-dried and dehydrated meal servings, has caused quite a stir on social media. With an online price tag of $79.99, the bucket boasts that it's more than just food, it's a product description. It says it provides readiness in the face of world uncertainty. The bucket features 80 entrees and sides, 30 breakfast servings, and 40 drink servings that just need water to prepare, for a total of 25,280 calories. The meal options range from teriyaki rice, tomato basil soup, pasta alfredo, to cheesy macaroni, and apple cinnamon cereal. Wow, think about it. Costco is helping shoppers prepare for an apocalypse. The good news is that there are now millions of preppers in this country that are preparing for the apocalyptic times that are rapidly approaching. That's kind of interesting. It used to be the fringe that was doing that. Now, the main populace is doing it. Let's go a little bit about Israel. And man, it is heating up in Israel. I talk to my friends in Israel almost weekly, and it's shocking. The Sea of Galilee is one of the most beautiful places on earth. But right now, all the hotels that are usually for tourists are loaded with 70,000 refugees, Israeli Jews from the northern part of Israel. It's being bombed consistently. You don't get it on the news again, but it's being bombed consistently. So this one says, Israel refuses appeasement and embarrasses those in the White House. Who were the parties most damaged by a series of brilliant operations carried out by Israel against its terrorist enemies? At the top of the list are the terrorists and their sponsors. By killing Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, Hamas military commander Mohammad Deif in Gaza, and Hezbollah chief of staff Fouad Shukr in Beirut, this Jewish state not only exacted retribution for the rivers of Jewish blood this trio has shed over the years, it also dealt powerful blows to the collective terrorist organization's ability to operate, and most of all, undermined the power and image of their chief sponsor and instigators, the Islamic regime of Iran. Their discomfort ought to be cause for rejoicing among Israel's friends and allies, as well as the governments and peoples of the West, against whom these Islamic killers are also waging war. But it isn't. Or at least that's not the reaction of the Biden-Harris administration and its leading press cheerleaders. On the contrary, Washington is acting as if it was the chief victim of the slayings of terrorists, who were, at least in theory, among those designated by the U.S. government as wanted men. To listen to and read the statements coming out of the administration, it's clear that their anguish is about something more fundamental than the understandable uncertainty about what might happen soon. One is that Israel's actions are interfering, pardon us, with Washington's desire to end the current conflict with Hamas in Gaza. They want to end in Hezbollah. They want in Lebanon. They want to end it because it's political. They want to go out knowing that they've done something. So they don't care about lives. As soon as possible, they want to end it on terms that will not unduly discomfort Iran. When asked to comment on the killing of these terrorists, all President Joe Biden could muster in response was to say in a rare live comment that, quote, it hasn't helped. His push for a ceasefire in Gaza would save Hamas. The other thing the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is embarrassing the Americans. His willingness to move decisively in this manner is not merely shining a light on the administration's weakness when dealing on the international stage. It's also having the effect of highlighting the fact that the United States is currently led by a person whose physical and mental fitness is very much in question, causing both friends and foes to wonder who, if anyone, is truly in charge in Washington right now. And Kamala Harris will be 100 times worse than Joe. The United States is being forced to choose what to do about Iran. And that has, thanks to the appeasement of the policies of Biden and former President Barack Obama, not only become a nuclear powerhouse, it's also now an imperial power in the Middle East that is dominating the region and forcing conflicts with Israel that most Arabs want no part of. Let me remind you that when Donald Trump was president, he had the Abraham Accords. They were Muslim countries who are joining in a peace treaties with Israel. Why? Because they also don't like Iran. Iran is a rogue nation, even threatening them. Simply put, while Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris never tire of saying that they support Israel's right to defend itself, what they really mean by this is they want Jerusalem to do as little as possible to stop their enemies from killing Jews, so that they can appease the Muslim vote in America. What they want from Netanyahu is peace and quiet, and an end to the war on Hamas on virtually any terms, even Hamas's terms. And the ones that Harris sketched out last week that call for a complete Israel retreat from Gaza would essentially hand a victory to the group that committed mass murder of 1,200 people on October 7th, would largely stifle the complaints of the left wing of the Democratic Party about being insufficiently hostile to Israel. That, as well as the dubious claim that this would be a triumph for America and its diplomacy, would help her to defeat President Donald Trump in November. Let me position this to you. Kamala Harris she has no knowledge of anything. She doesn't have any knowledge of the border. She said she's never even been to Europe. I mean, this lady should not be calling any shots ever. It's anything for power at any cost, including human life. The Bible says, though, to whom much is given, much is required. They'll have to answer for it. When Biden spoke of Israel not being helpful, he wasn't so much speaking about the claim that an Israeli surrender of its interests would free the more than 100 hostages still being held by Hamas. Rather, he was referring to the administration's ongoing efforts to pose as a decisive factor and actor on the global stage, when in fact it's anything but that. Middle East policies pursued by Obama, then Biden, and now by U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken and Harris is that it is Iran that is in control, not the United States. With the president so feeble that he was forced to end his re-election campaign weeks before his party was about to nominate him, an equally weak-willed replacement like Harris now standing in for him, it's little wonder that the international community cannot trust or rely on the United States to play a coherent, let alone a decisive role on the world stage. We've lost all credibility. From the moment he took office in 2021, his foreign policy was one that inspired contempt among America's foes and concern on part of its allies. His feckless pursuit of another round of appeasement of Iran and then the disastrous retreat from Afghanistan marked his presidency as one whose hallmark was defeat and disgrace, something that directly led to the Russian invasion of Ukraine and ultimately to Hamas's October 7th assault on Israel. There's a genuine uncertainty about what will happen in the coming days, weeks and months until November, and the inauguration of a new president next January. The more the Islamist foes of the West and Israel fear for their lives, the more likely it is that they will be deterred into further mayhem, allowing both Israelis and Americans to be safer. By killing Fukar, Deif, and Hania, and giving the mullahs in Tehran reason to worry about their own security, Israel is defending its people against Islamic murderers and doing a job that Americans needed done, whether or not it served the political and the policy interests of Biden and Harris. As long as American policy is dedicated to appeasing the mullahs in Tehran and propping up their terrorist allies, coupled with a leadership vacuum in Washington, Israel cannot just sit back and watch its enemies grow more powerful and bolder in their efforts to kill Jews. Americans who care about their country's security should be cheering Israel for doing what a failed administration either won't or cannot do. Let's go a little bit to the economy and tell you what's going there. Biden's outrageous aid program to Hamas, almost $1 billion so far. The U.S. has donated close to $1 billion of your money to Gaza, ruled by the officially designated terrorist group Hamas. And yet, since October 7th, the Biden administration has rewarded Hamas with a gift of close to $1 billion in U.S. taxpayer money, disguised as humanitarian aid, most which clearly ends up in the hands of Hamas, here, and there. A lawsuit brought in December of 2022 and updated in March 2024 by Representative Ronnie Jackson and victims of terrorist attacks in Israel alleges that President Joe Biden and Secretary of State Anthony Blinken knowingly and unlawfully provided more than $1.5 billion in aid to Gaza and the West Bank since taking office. Biden and Blinken have known for years that the U.S. aid is providing material support for Hamas, for their tunnels, for their rockets, for their weapon procurement, and command and control infrastructure, among other terror structures, the lawsuit stated. The Biden administration has sought to have the case dismissed 2 times, but failed both times. So billions in U.S. aid for a Gaza Strip, which is home to just 2 million people, most of whom actively support terrorists running their territory and their Iranian handlers, according to poll after poll. The Biden administration would have Americans believe it's all about humanitarian aid for people in extreme need. It is not. The Integrated Food Security Phase Classification, ICP, a UN-affiliated body, published 2 reports this past June, concluding that there is absolutely no famine and that the supply of food in Gaza has, in fact, increased, not decreased in recent months. The report seems to ask whether it is a responsible policy to send billions of aid to a terrorist group supposedly while the nearly 350 million people around the world are experiencing the most extreme forms of hunger right now. Of those, nearly 49 million people are on the brink of famine and death. The US WFP lists 10 countries suffering the most from hunger right now. Sudan, 26 million. Democratic Republic of Congo, 23.4 million. Yemen, 17 million. Syria, 13 million. Afghanistan, 12 million. South Sudan, 17 million. Gaza is nowhere to be found on the list. The people are not starving. They're not suffering for food. It's a lie from the media and from the Biden-Harris administration. Sudan is a country in the world where the most people facing hunger, and the situation is extremely extreme, with people eating grass and peanut shells. Right now, at least 750,000 people are on the brink of starvation and death in Sudan, And what's America doing for Sudan? Absolutely nothing. How much humanitarian aid do we send? Absolutely nothing. It's a devastating civil war has left over half the country's 48 million people in a situation of chronic hunger. So, how much aid did the Biden administration, so concerned with humanitarian assistance in dire need, donated to Sudan? Nothing. Let it sink in. Gaza's Hamas terrorists who shoot at their own people when they try to take some of the aid intended for them received much more than that, obviously. How about the Republic of Congo, where 23.4 million people face starvation? They got about half the amount that Gaza received. In short, the Biden administration has donated less to Sudan and Congo combined, where nearly a total of 50 million people are in starvation, than to Gaza, where 2 million people face no such thing. So what's going on? Where is Congress? There is more Hamas. There is more. Hamas is an Iranian proxy. Iran orchestrated the October 7th attacks. Iran sends 100 million to Hamas, 700 million to Hezbollah, tens of millions to Islamic Jihad every year. Biden has actively enabled those Iranian donations by propping up the Iranian Islamic regime's generous financing of its terrorist proxies. Most recently in March by offering Iran sanction waivers worth $10 million. Iran officially labeled the world's leading sponsor of state terrorism by the 2023 U.S. Annual Terrorism Report, calls the U.S. Great Satan, and continues to vow death to America. And the Biden administration is doing all they can to help them kill America. That's why you have to go vote in November, because they're not going to help us. You have to vote. Let's go a little bit further at the economy. Wall Street is starting to freak out about the horrendous state of the economy. It's finally happening. Looks like investors are starting to figure it out. Bad economic numbers continue pouring in, but so far the Federal Reserve has refused to pull the trigger on a rate cut. We've seen this story before and it never ends well. It's often said that he who hesitates is lost. And in this case, the Fed's hesitation could mean a tremendous amount of economic pain during the months ahead. Stocks fell sharply on Friday as a much weaker than anticipated jobs report for July ignited worries that the economy could be falling into a recession. Its session low, the 30 stock index, was down 989 points. Stocks sank after July job growth in the U.S. slowed more than expected, while the unemployment rate rose to the highest since October 2021. Now the unemployment rate is 4.3%. Some mega cap names saw steep losses during the day. Amazon's second quarter results sparked investors concerned about big tech's ability and the blowout levels of AI related spending. Revenue estimates and issuing a disappointing forecast. Intel, meanwhile, cratered 26% after announcing weak guidance and layoffs. Nvidia lost 1.8%, following a 6% loss the day before. Nasdaq was down more than 10% from its record high. The S&P 500 and the Dow were 5.7% and 4% below their all-time highs respectively. Many still believe that the Fed will give us a rate cut in September, but there's others that are concerned that the Fed may not be acting quickly enough to keep America's job market in good shape. The narrative on the Wall Street is shifting. Fear is starting to take hold as concerns mount that the Fed may not be acting quickly enough to keep America's job market in good shape. Double Line CEO Jeffrey Gundlach is using even stronger language. He says the Fed is risking a recession by not making a move right now. I've been at this, he says, this game for over 40 years, and it seems to happen every single time. All the other underlying aspects of employment data are not improving, they're deteriorating. And so it starts to get to that upper level where they have to start cutting rates. The ISM, Institute for Supply Management, registered 46.8% last month, a faster rate when compared to June's figure. In addition, initial applications for unemployment benefits jumped up to its highest level in about a year last week. 249,000 filings, highest tally since August of last year. Meanwhile, continuing claims filed by people who have received unemployment benefits for at least a week jumped to 1.877 million, the highest level since November of 2020. Sadly, a lot more layoffs are coming as thousands upon thousands of businesses get into very, very serious trouble all over the nation. This week, we learned that a furniture retailer that had survived the Great Depression, the Great Recession, and COVID pandemic is closing all 380 of their stores and filing for bankruptcy. The 120-year-old furniture chain will shutter all 380 stores after its parent company filed for bankruptcy. The latest brick-and-mortar business to buckle from high overhead costs and massive debt. That's Badcock Home Furniture and more. They announced the going out of business sale on Tuesday. Other furniture chains, including Bob's Stores, Z Gallery, Mitchell Gold, and Bob Williams, also filed for bankruptcy this year. Overall, U.S. retailers have announced the closure of almost 2,600 stores in 2024, a record high. If the U.S. economy really is in good shape, like the mainstream media is insisting, then why is all this happening? At the same time as all this is happening, we have our national debt now surpassing $35 trillion. And even the New York Times is admitting that it is growing more quickly than the economists have predicted. To mark this milestone, the House Budget Committee released some numbers about how rapidly our debt has been growing over the last year, 12 months. $196 billion in new debt every month, $6.4 billion in new debt every day, $268 million in new debt every hour, $44.5 million in new debt every single minute, and $74,401 in new debt every second. It's staggering. That third number in the list really stands out. $268 million is being stolen from future generations of Americans every single hour of every single day, and hardly anyone seems to care. We're literally committing national economic suicide. When a government borrows money which must be paid back later, prosperity in the future is being sacrificed for more prosperity in the present. We are $10 trillion in debt. We were $10 trillion in debt when Barack Obama entered the White House. Now we're $35 trillion in debt. We have literally destroyed the bright future that our children and our grandchildren were supposed to have. But all of this borrowing has allowed us to enjoy a standard of living that is far higher than we actually deserve. We continue to pile up mountains of debt. Since the end of the pandemic, we've experienced an average of 10% a year growth in homelessness. 4 states that have the largest population of homelessness: California, New York, Florida, Washington. In addition to growing homelessness, we are also seeing poverty and hunger all over this nation. In 2023, more than 12% of the nation was living below the poverty line. Nearly 13% said they didn't have enough to eat. It's unconscionable in America. Our national debt has gone from $10 trillion again to $35 trillion since Barack Obama first entered the White House. And our economy is still crumbling no matter how much money they push into it. This represents an epic failure of historic proportions. We've accumulated the largest amount of debt in the history of the world, and most of the population is still struggling. But all this money has created an immensely painful cost of living crisis. Today, there are 6 major cities where you will only be able to live a middle-class lifestyle even though you're making, you ready? $200,000 a year. Earning $200,000 a year might seem like enough to have a life of luxury, but in 6 of the 25 largest U.S. metropolises, rampant inflation in the past 2 years means this 6-figure salary is only enough to be middle class. Of course, the vast majority of Americans will never make $200,000 a year. In fact, most Americans are just barely scraping by. 71% of U.S. adults are stressed about their ability to afford everyday expenses. Grocery bills frustrate them. Utilities, rent, mortgage payments, gasoline, insurance payments round out the top 5 most annoying expenses. So let me ask you a question. Are you constantly stressed out about your finances? If so, you're certainly not alone. Unfortunately, things are only going to get worse from here. Decades of incredibly foolish decisions have set the stage for a colossal collapse. Yes, a lot of people may be fine right now. The bubble we have been riding will eventually and inevitably burst. Once that occurs, the consequences will be absolutely excruciating. Here in 2024, red flags are popping up on almost daily basis, and the stock numbers on Friday could just be the beginning of something much worse to come. As conditions get even worse during the second half of this year and beyond, our leaders will attempt to stabilize things by doing even more what they've already been doing, pumping more money and devaluing your money. But that will just make the cost of living crisis even worse, and it will just make our long-term problems even worse. Of course, our long-term problems are rapidly becoming our short-term problems. The entire system is convulsing with tremors, and our bubble economy is slowly but surely heading toward a date with oblivion. We're experiencing the leading edge of an economic storm, which will greatly intensify during the second half of 2024. That's why Costco is having buckets of food that they're selling for an apocalypse. And the outlook for 2025 is absolutely dismal. So what should we do with all of this? Well, in the short term, protect your assets and build up a sizable emergency fund. Get out of debt. No matter what happens, you're going to need to have enough money to pay your bills. Well, in the long term, I'm entirely convinced that we're going to experience the most painful period in our history. Our leaders have been making incredibly bad decisions for decades. I've been talking about this for over 20 years. And now we've entered a time when the consequences of the decision will become obvious to all. I want to give you the national debt. I think I put it up here. There it is. Nope. That's the national debt. Look at this thing. This is from 1917, where it was nothing. We had a balanced budgets. This was a debt ceiling that we were never supposed to go over. If you're following my hand, it's to the middle of the chart. As we continued to go up, there was more and more debt ceilings all the way down the line. Congress said, we're never going to go over this. They went over them every single time. Now we're 36 off the chart, $35 trillion in debt. That should show you something. You cannot sustain that forever. It's not going to be sustainable. And you know what? Most people won't worry about it until they have to worry about it. But that's why we need to worry about it or concern ourselves about it right now. Let's talk about war. Middle East war could be triggered for a much larger energy war. So, the skeptics making accusations of conspiracy theory and doom and gloom have been proven wrong again. The skeptics have got it all wrong. The geopolitical atmosphere is turning sour very fast. I still don't think a lot of people realize how truly volatile the situation is globally right now. We're on the brink, we're on the edge of World War III. Man, listen to the news I'm giving you tonight. This is a world gone nuts. This is a world in peril. And most Americans, most people just keep sailing along. From my point of view, World War III has already begun, at least in economic terms. Let's not forget the fact that Ukraine is essentially a proxy of all NATO, for all of NATO against Russia. And the situation in the Middle East is about to become much, much worse. Because of the alliances involved in the fragile nature of global energy exports, there's a danger of a systematic collapse that should widen a war breakout between Israel and multiple Arab nations. It appears that such a war is imminent. But why should Americans care? Why should we care? Well, it's pretty simple. War spurs shortages. And shortages in the Middle East of a stagflation crisis are a very bad thing. Around 30% of all oil exports travel through the Strait of Hormuz. It's a narrow passage which a nation like Iran can easily block for months at a time. Sinking a few larger vessels in the strait would obstruct all cargo, ship traffic, and all oil tank traffic. Trying to clean up the mess would be difficult because artillery, which is almost impossible to accept, can rain down from Iran on any vessel trying to drag sunken ships out of the way. This is not a good scenario. Iran, Lebanon, and Israel have been exchanging limited fire for months now. It's nothing new. What is new is the change in tone after Hezbollah rocket strike on children's soccer game in the remote Druze village of Majd al-Shams that killed 12. I've been in that village many, many times. The Druze are a very, very peaceful people. Not Jews, Druze. They're very peaceful. They would never take arms against anyone. On the other side, Israel's brazen assassination of the Hamas political leader Ismail Haniyeh on Iranian soil this week is a clear catalyst for war. IDF officials also announced that they had killed top Hezbollah military commander Fouad Shukr in a precision missile strike Tuesday in Beirut. There's no escaping it now. Iran's supreme religious leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has ordered retaliation against Israel and issued an order for Iran to strike the Israelis directly. If you wanted to fly to Israel today, you can't. No airlines are flying into Israel. Iran will likely use extended missile barrages, but also stage troops in Syria and Lebanon. America has already sent some of our carriers there. The Houthis in Yemen will then increase their attacks on ships traversing the Red Sea. It's hard to say how much Russia will involve itself at first, but Turkey this week said they will go to the aid of Iran. I have no doubt more advanced Russian missiles and other weapons will make an appearance on the battlefield. The prospect of world war is absolutely immense. Israel will not be able to fight in Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, and Iran all at the same time. Energy experts in the region will definitely face a slowdown, if not a complete shutdown. At that point, the war won't just be about Israel. It'll be about the whole world. The high risk of terrorism this entails should not be overlooked. We've had an undefended border and record illegal crossings for a few years now under Biden. Lord knows how many terrorists are right now on American soil. Beyond that, the political left in the West has tied itself to the Palestinian wagon as if it's their business. In reality, leftists view the war in Gaza as just another vehicle for their outrage. They use minorities, they use gays, and now they're using Muslims. It's classic Marxist strategy of hijacking the social causes of other groups and co-opting their momentum. Gaza is just another excuse for progressive spastics to riot and start burning more of the West down, which is their true goal, by the way. Anyone that opposes them will be automatically being accused of being a Zionist sympathizer, even if Israel is not their concern. So there will surely be Muslim terror attacks, but also civil conflicts triggered by leftists exploiting the situation to their advantage. Let me stop here for a second. I pray that none of this happens, but I wish we knew how close we are to this in America. We've had some peace right now, but I'm telling you, the undergirdings of what's going on in the world and even to our borders is unbelievable. The timing of these events in tandem with the election is definitely not coincidental. Whoever winds up in the office will eventually be stuck with the war, inheriting a disaster from day one. Logistical shortcomings in the West in a World War III scenario could happen right now. At the top of the list will be manpower, just as we've seen in Ukraine. That's why we've been hearing military and political officials hint about a new draft over the next couple of years. They know what's coming. The trap has been set. We'll have to wait to observe the scale of the response from Lebanon and Iran, but I believe the worst case scenario is at hand. There are multiple powder keg events in progress around the world right now. Jesus told us there'll be wars and rumors of wars. He wasn't talking about small skirmishes. Whenever he talks about prophecy, it's worldwide. But the Middle East situation looks to be the most disastrous by far in terms of how it will affect U.S. and global economy. I've told you this before. This could be the Psalm 85 war. This could be the Gog and Magog war. We are right there. And so I hope that we understand that, and that we understand that now is the day and now is the time to gather your family and tell them about God and tell them that Jesus is coming back no matter how bad this looks. Let me give you a little bit about religion. Harris' speech revives culture war against the people of faith. This woman is demonic. Vice President Kamala Harris spoke before the American Federation of Teachers, the AFT, last Thursday in her first speech as a presidential candidate. Rather than hiding the fact that the AFT has a tremendous amount of power and influence in the Biden administration and the country, Harris proudly announced it, thanking the AFT president, Randy Weingarten, for being a great force, an incredible friend and advisor to the White House. AFT was a key advisor to the CDC in developing plans for school reopenings, which were actually plans to keep schools closed. And we know the harm that did to our children and families. Harris told the AFT teachers, "We see a future where no teacher has to struggle with the burden of a student loan debt." So as an example, our administration has forgiven student loan debt for nearly 5 million Americans and twice as much for our public servants, including our teachers. But in reality, the Biden administration's SAVE plan has been tied up in court, and the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in June of 2023 that the administration does not have the authority to forgive student loan debt. Thank God. Why should those hardworking taxpayers who decide not to go to college or who have worked to pay off their bills have to pay somebody else? Harris accuses Republicans of attacking the freedom to vote. She also told teachers, while you teach students about democracy and representative government, extremists attack the sacred freedom to vote. In reality, however, Republicans are working very hard to strengthen election integrity. Democrats are also opposing bills that would stop election fraud at the state level. Why would you oppose that? In Michigan, for example, all Democrats in the House of Representatives voted against 2 bills that stripped the power of local election officials to investigate alleged fraud and double the fees of candidates who request ballot recounts, among other changes. They're allowing fraud. Harris continues the narrative that Republicans are banning books. Harris declared, "And while you teach students about our nation's past, these extremists attack the freedom to learn and acknowledge our nation's true and full history, including book bans. Book bans in this year of our Lord, 2024, she said, in these last 2 issues. Just think about it. She's actually making a mockery of the Lord. We want to ban assault weapons, and they want to ban books. Well, a Republican spokesman said, we have nothing to do with banning books. We have materials to present to our children when they are incapable of understanding them, we're against. Or they're inappropriate educationally, we're against. So this charge about banning books just rings so hollow. Parents can't see right through that. It's such a weak point for them. I'm surprised she brought it up. I guess it must work with her base. She urges teachers to continue teaching children LGBTQ ideology. She says, these extremists also attack the freedom to love who you love openly with pride. Now I have to tell you, so many of you know, in 2004 on Valentine's Day weekend, I was one of the first, listen to it, elected officials in the country to perform same-sex marriages. While teachers and all Americans have the freedom to love who they want to love, they should not disregard parental authority and families' religious beliefs by pushing LGBTQ ideology or queer theory on students. Activist teachers who want to indoctrinate kids on topics like gay sex, oral sex, gender fluidity, and other LGBTQ propaganda should not be allowed to do so. Teachers' unions are powerful political groups that hold leftist, Marxist views, seeking to fundamentally change America. It's essential for parents and all Americans to be aware of the power of teachers' unions. The current cultural war is one of next-gen Marxists versus people of faith, traditional families, and freedom-loving Americans. It's also, though, a spiritual war. We should not shy away from our faith or our biblical values. We should continue to teach our children to love God with all their heart, soul, and mind, and strength by studying the Bible with them and teaching them to love their neighbors as ourselves. Even when we disagree with them, we should teach them about the sanctity of every single human life, from the moment of fertilization until natural death. Finally, we should equip our children to recognize lies and to defend the truth by teaching them a biblical worldview, the truth about American history, and the principles in which it is founded. Let me give you this one tonight. The daily article it comes from, How to Strengthen Your Faith in the Face of Economic Uncertainty. There were some massive news stories over this past week. Debbie strengthened and into a hurricane overnight and brought catastrophic flooding to Florida. Kamala Harris earned enough votes to become the Democratic Party's presidential nominee. The U.S. sent jets and warships to the Middle East as Israel prepares for severe Iranian retaliation. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin revoked the plea deal for accused September 11th plotters. But I would guess that none of these feels personally relevant to us and to you, as the financial news of recent days is causing many to wonder again if there's a recession. Let me just reiterate a couple points. The Dow closed 600 points, down more 600 points on Friday. The NASDAQ fell 10% below its record high on disappointing earnings from Amazon and Intel. U.S. hiring unexpectedly declined. Unemployment rose in the month as well. Investors' fears that the Federal Reserve made a mistake by keeping interest rates at current levels. So what does this mean? Well, there's a global sell-off coming. Japanese stocks suffered their biggest one-day drop in history. European stocks fallen more than 2% in early trading yesterday. Many have been struggling financially for some time. The percentage of past due credit is at its highest level ever. Young adults are discouraged, and 60-year-olds are staring at financial peril. So how is the Christian faith relative to times like these? It's one thing to report the news, but how's your faith relative to it? We're in a period of great danger, but also I'm pregnant with opportunity for a new path if we can seize it. The path we've been on for generations just simply is not working. Secularism, by definition, values only this world and thus measures success by material means. But this is what philosophers call a category mistake, akin to asking how much the number 7 weighs, or the color of a sea scale. In this case, we're using creation as if it were the creator, valuing the means as the ends. And this doesn't work because it simply can't work. Humans have 4 fundamental needs: belonging, self-esteem, control, and meaningful existence. None can be met by material possessions. Let me repeat it. We want belonging, we want self-esteem, we want control, and we want meaningful existence. None of those can be met fully by material possessions. In a consumption-based economy, we're conditioned to be consumers. In a post-Christian culture, we're conditioned to be existentialists who choose what we want in this world over what we will want in the next. However, the financial anxiety of these days offers us an opportunity to a new path. What we need today is to depend on God's love and God's grace. St. Alphonsus Liguori, 1797, described God's love for man. Quote, "He gave us a soul made in his likeness and endowed us with memory, intellect, and will. He gave us a body equipped with senses. It was for him that he created the heavens and the earth and such an abundance of things. He made all these things out of love for man. so that all of creation might serve man, and man in turn might love God out of gratitude for so many gifts. Okay, so the 4 basic needs, belonging, self-esteem, control, meaningful existence, can only be found in our trust and our dependence on God's love and His grace. Money, power, careers cannot and will not ever meet those needs. Only God can. Japan's #1 billionaire, Philip Ching, I think I have it here, said this. He says, having money or material things is empty without Jesus. And it surely is. Just a couple more and then we're done with In the News. Women believing that Harris lied that having children is bad for the environment. Large numbers of young women in their 20s and 30s are getting permanently sterilized in order to make sure that they will never get pregnant. In the old days, it was extremely rare to hear of a young woman getting sterilized during her prime childbearing years, but now it's very common. According to one national study, there's a very sharp increase in the number of tubal sterilizations and vasectomies immediately following the Supreme Court decision to overturn Roe versus Wade. Looking at the data, 113 million people across the United States have chosen to do that. The researchers found after the Dobbs decision, there was an immediate increase of 58 sterilization procedures for women, or about 5.31 procedures per month on 100,000 people, nearly double the previous rate. Sadly, a study that was recently released by Pew's Research Center discovered that the portion of the population that is not interested in raising children has gotten much, much larger. When the survey was conducted in 2023, 47% of those younger than 50 without children said they were unlikely ever to have children, an increase of 10 percentage points since 2018. When asked why kids were not in their future, 57% said they simply didn't want to have them. Women were more likely to respond this way than men. Reasons also included their career, their interests, concerns about the state of the world, worries about the cost of raising a child, and about environment, including climate change. So where in the world are all these people getting these ideas? Could it be possible they are being influenced to think this way? Millions upon millions of our young people have fully embraced the values that politicians such as Kamala Harris have been preaching. Resurfaced video shows Kamala Harris suggesting that young people should not have children due to climate change. Where does she get off saying something like that? She calls climate anxiety the fear of the future and the unknown of whether it makes sense for you to even think about having children. And any society that does not value marriage, family, and children is not going to survive or thrive for very long. Here in the United States, our birth rate has been below replacement level since the 1970s. And last year, it dropped at all-time brand new low, a rate of 1.62 in 2023. The only reason our population has still been growing is due to record levels of immigrants. Having a lot of money is used as extremely very important not to have children. Those that believe in population control have done a great job of convincing millions upon millions of our young people that having children is not desirable. We've been trained to chase after money, but that's a road that does not lead to true happiness. In fact, many of the wealthiest people in the world are extremely miserable. Please don't buy into the lies that society is trying to sell you. Choosing to get sterilized is not the answer, and it is a decision that you can end up deeply regretting down the road. All right, last one tonight. Harris stumps for the gender-confused vote with appearance on drag show. Listen to this. Kamala Harris has thrown her hat into the drag race for president, making one of her first campaign appearances on TV show glamorizing gender confusion. Late last week, Harris appeared on the RuPaul Drag Race show to stump for the cross-dresser vote. Here's what she said. Each day we are seeing our rights and freedoms under attack, including the right to everyone to be with who they are, love who they want to love, openly with pride, Harris stated without proof. So as we fight back against these attacks, let's all remember no one is alone. She says we're all in this together, repeating the favorite lie of 2020 lockdown supporters. And your vote is your power. So please make sure your voice is heard in November and register to vote. Presumably, Harris encouraged viewers to take time between the drag queen story hours to help choose their leader in the free world. Then she says, "Can I get an amen?" Asked one of the actors mocking evangelical sermons. "Amen," the LGBT identified cast replied sacrilegiously. With a RuPaul cameo, Harris has become the first sitting vice president to appear on a drag show and to visit an abortion facility. When Harris supporters say slay queen, S-L-A-Y, they mean the gender binary and the unborn. So, this, she says, By this, she means parents. She says this is the year of the Lord. Notice recurring sacrifice. Harris has further castigated her opponents for allegedly supporting book bans this year, as I told you, and she says the year of our Lord. But this, she means parents' grassroots efforts to keep school bureaucrats from furnishing pornography to our minor children in taxpayer-funded schools. There are, of course, laws against pedophilia, whose practitioners, the most extreme wing of the LGBTQIA+ movement, has renamed minor attracted persons. However, the radical gender ideologies got the message loud and clear. A Harris administration will not only uphold but also expand upon the political agenda of transgender Americans established by the Biden administration. Her vice president, recently picked, is all for, Minnesota is all for castrating first grade boys. So Kamala Harris's record has given them all the confidence they need to believe that she stands with LGBTQ. I'll say it. Kamala Harris is a she-devil. She's a Jezebel. She's predating the whore that sits on Babylon. In 2004, she officiated same-sex weddings as San Francisco District Attorney. And then Mayor Gavin Newsom ordered officials to ignore state law. She refused to defend Proposition B when California voters democratically defined marriage as the union of one man and one woman, and later worked to overturn the election in court. So much for defending democracy. As the more committed ideologue of the Biden-Harris administration, she has guided the administration's full-scale, whole-of-government embrace of LGBT extremism in 2021. Their administration has placed luggage-stealing, trans-identifying people in sensitive government positions. It's boasted of rewriting Title X to allow males inside female locker rooms. Now Harris has amplified her RuPaul appearance, posting behind-the-scenes footage of her personal social media in which she calls herself she/her, ratcheting up millions of views. Appearing on a drag queen show is virtually Kamala Harris's first presidential campaign event. It signals her priorities and the way she will govern if elected. The media usually agrees. Yet Kamala Harris's appearance drew virtually no media coverage. I wonder why. If you think the Olympics opening ceremonies were weird, check out where Kamala opened her presidential campaign this week, stated American Greatness. The border czar has visited RuPaul's workroom the same number of times she's visited the border, observed the Washington Free Beacon reporter Chuck Ross. In the coming days, Harris and her supporters will continue to try to reinvent her as more moderate, centrist candidate. They're looking for the independent vote, focused on the struggles of the middle class. They've never cared about the middle class. Yet her first campaign stops have been to a teachers union and a drag show. By so doing, she's telling her base that they're on the top of her mind and first in line to receive their rewards in the coming Camelot. If you want to know who Kamala Harris will serve, just look at her campaign stops. The rest is just political cross-dressing. That's in the news. It's something to be concerned about, but I was talking to my wife the other day, we were talking about how horrific some of the things are. And it boils down to this: you and I are citizens of another country. Our country is above. And as citizens of that country above, we are not concerned with it. What do I mean by that? Well, I'm concerned with what's happening in America. But God is sovereign. He will have his way. And I know in the end, we win. Not Kamala Harris, not the ultra-left liberals, not LGBTQs. God wins. I'm on God's side. I'm staying on God's side. I know you are too.